What is up, guys? I'm Andres.
This is RB3.
I'm Sabrina.
And joining us today, it is Mr. Ellis Sutton. What is up, man?
What's up, y'all? How y'all doing?
Good, man. I'm so glad to have you right here on the Main Enough podcast. We're going to be talking about film school, the impact of film school, and USC Film School specifically because of you and RB3, who are both film school grads. That's kind of a big deal already, but we're going to get into all that on this episode of the Meeting of Podcast. This was something that RB3 wanted to bring up. So let me toss it to you first, man. Why did you want to talk about this besides the whole I just graduated from USC aspect of it?
I loved my time at film school. I thought it was a great time. Obviously, I met some incredible people like my boy Ellis here. And, my man Ellis has obviously been seeing like a lot of success. I see a lot of my other classmates having a lot of success coming out of college and coming out of USC. And yeah, I kind of want to celebrate. I kind of want to talk about it. I notice it's a subject matter that a lot of our audience has been kind of clamoring for us to talk about too. And I think it's interesting when we have somebody like me and Ellis who went to like USC and then kind of talk about our experiences, because I think at least for me, like when I was trying to apply to college, I really didn't have a place to look for like a perspective on film school, like, at least on the online space or the video space. So I think it would just be an interesting conversation for young people who are in high school, who are in, junior college or something, who want to think about the opportunities of going to film school. We can kind of have that dialogue about it.
What kind of I'm going to toss it to you, Ellis. What kind of filmmakers did you take from growing up and that really inspired you to go to film school?
Man, honestly, not really any filmmakers.
Okay.
I didn't really grow up with a huge background in filmmaking. I like to watch movies and stuff. I knew some of my favorite movies growing up, but I never really knew about who the director of the movies were until I got to high school. And then it wasn't until I got to high school I took this film class where we got to analyze films, kind of like how we do in some of our cinema media studies courses at USC. And ultimately why I decided to go to film school was just because I realized in my life, I love films, I love filmmaking, and I don't think that there's any better thing that I could have possibly done where I could have combined a creative as well as the business and logistical side behind filmmaking. I just felt like it was the best of both worlds in terms of what I'm interested in.
Were your parents pretty supportive of the fact that you wanted to go to film school?
They were. I think the person who really wasn't for it was me. I was the one critical of myself, man, because I actually didn't come to USC for film. I transferred into the film school. So I wasn't even going to do it unless I felt like there was a viable option for me to pursue a real career in filmmaking. Because if I didn't, it was important for me to be able to pay the bills, and because it's hard in the filmmaking career, and it was also important for me to sort of leave a lasting legacy for myself, but also for my family. And I cared a lot about that. And so I didn't want to let my family down by, falling short in whatever career I was going to pursue. So I knew when I made that decision to apply to film school, I was going to do all that I can to make it in the industry.
What was your original major?
I was a history major. Nice. So the plan was to go to law school, and I was gonna start a nonprofit at some point. And so now the game plan is become a film and TV producer, and then start a nonprofit then. The nonprofit was basically geared towards helping low-income students have better resources for college. And one day I hope it can become a scholarship foundation. But that was something that I was really passionate about. Like, I care a lot about inequities in education. And surprisingly enough, I also care a lot about, I like film. That's kind of like my means to an end.
Yeah.
And so I care a lot about those things. So that's how I ended up getting here.
That's really cool, man. And it's one of those things where it's like you realize like you can combine both the power of film and then the power of social impact is something that we talk about all the time. But I'll toss the question to you as well, RB3. Did you always want to go to film school?
Well, I know I always wanted to go to USC.
Okay.
You know, being from Compton, you know, USC is just kind of like that like beaming pinnacle, that like one spot in the hood that like is untouchable, and then everything else is just whatever. But I really, I wanted to go to USC my entire life. Even went back in, and people I've told this story a bunch of times, but yeah, I was originally supposed to be going into engineering, and then ultimately, and my family and parents wanted me to go engineering, but I just kind of broke the mold and ended up studying film. I say that because even when I was going for the engineering path, I still wanted to go to USC because they have one of the best engineering programs. And fortunately, I just got lucky that USC just so happens to have one of the best film programs in the world too. So it was just perfect. It worked out for me. Just wanted to go there. I also knew, an inspiration of mine was John Singleton. Growing up, John Singleton came from USC, and I remember it was in 2014, like right before I was applying to colleges. Again, by that point, I knew I wanted to go to USC, but I read an article in the Hollywood Reporter about John Singleton and kind of his story about how he was just, a kid from South Central LA who just loved movies. He loved writing. He loved screenwriting. He applied to USC, was the only black kid in his class, and he was working as a security guard for like Lawrence Fishburne, and then gave him the script for Boys in the Hood that he wrote like at 21, 22, 23. So by the time he was 23, they were on set filming it. By the time he was 24, it was released, and he ended up becoming the youngest. He became both the first black filmmaker ever nominated for Best Director at the Oscars and the youngest. So it's just like a really inspiring story that I always kind of took from, especially from John Singleton, who I love Boys in the Hood. Baby Boy is one of my favorite movies of all time. Poetic Justice. So he has like a lot of great films, and that's kind of always been one of my inspirations, like in terms of going to film school and everything like that. So.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. And obviously, John Singleton is legendary already.
Yeah.
I want to toss it to you, Sabrina, just because I always forget. I know you didn't go to film school.
No.
Where did you go? Remind me. I used to know this.
FITM downtown.
Okay.
The fashion school. Yeah,
Okay.
but I didn't study fashion. But I actually, when I was in high school, that was kind of one of my things was, do I go to film school? Do I pursue this? So I'm really excited to talk about it with you guys and hear your perspectives coming out of it, because it was always one of those things. And I love hearing both of you say that you originally went for different reasons, or originally kind of had a different, like RB3 with his engineering and with your history and wanting to go to law school. It's kind of cool because I think pursuing any kind of creative outlet, so obviously we talk about film on this podcast, but there's always kind of that, like, you're unsure about where this path will lead you.
Right.
And so that was kind of the thing that I really dealt with in high school, and I didn't feel confident enough to pursue that. So not that I regret it, but I wish I kind of just had more of a drive and more of a push at that time to go for something like that. So it's really cool to hear both of your guys' experiences and kind of like all that you guys got out of it, because both of you are doing incredible things.
Yeah.
And taking that leap
go
of
ahead.
faith. Taking that
Yeah.
leap
Yeah.
of faith too is super crucial to the journey. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I think for a lot of high school kids, maybe I'm throwing myself into a group where they have my experience, where you're not allowed to do anything that's artsy. That's not going to pay the bills, because that's kind of my ideology of like my parents, who are literally not born in this country. I'm first generation, and their goal was to like come to America so that I can become a doctor, a lawyer, a very wealthy person that doesn't need to struggle like they did growing up in Mexico and Colombia. So they never gave me that option. I never had it. So I had to discover film courses when I went to Arizona State, shout out to ASU, and film media classes that I took. And that's kind of what got me into saying, hey, maybe I can move to LA and pursue this as a career, versus actually majoring in it the way you guys did. But it's different ways that people get into it. But let me, before we get into your film, man, do you have any current filmmakers that you kind of take inspiration from?
I
Ellis?
do. I really love Ryan Coogler.
Mm,
He's the GOAT in my opinion.
yes.
I really love Spike Lee. I really love Jordan Peele. Oh, there you go. There you
Hey.
go. Mars.
Yeah.
I really love Jordan Peele. And I also really love this is a weird one, Spike Jones. I love
Oh
Spike
yeah.
Jones.
Oh yeah.
And I really love the Florida Project.
Sean Baker.
Yep, by Sean Baker. Spike Jones was Where the Wild Things Are was one of those films that was the first time I think I really discovered independent filmmaking. Because Where Wild Things Are had that weird like indie vibe to it, and I didn't know what it was. I knew it was based off a kid's book. I saw it at the time because I knew of the kid's book, but I saw it and I was just like, this is different than anything I've really seen before. And I really think it set a tone in terms of indie films that I like. And also I think it set a tone in general for like what you kind of do in the independent cinema space. I really love Where the Wild Things Are. That's one of my big time, all time films.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring up the Florida Project and you bring up Where the Wild Things Are, because the short film that I saw, and I'm going to butcher the name again, it's Crystal and Ray, right?
Yeah.
Crystal and Ray also stars a child actor. And before coming on camera, we were talking about how was that like? And I guess I'll do it now that we're recording and that we're officially in this episode. But how was that like, man?
Oh man, little Ryan was a blessing in disguise. One thing about directing in general is it's hard to direct when you don't have access to really great talent. And I feel like the biggest thing a director can do for him or herself or their self is cast. And so if you do really good job in casting, it takes a whole load off of the amount of directing you have to do. And we got lucky that Ryan fell into our laps when she submitted her audition tape. I remember I got very emotional watching her tape, and I just felt like, okay, well, she's got the part. So who gonna be the mom? Who gonna be the mom? And we saw other people, they were really good too. They were really talented, but she just gave some form of emotion to it that you couldn't ignore. And so it really wasn't that hard directing her, because she just kind of brought it. I mean, like RB was on set that day. I really didn't give her too many notes. There was a couple times where she spoke a little fast. I had to tell her to slow down a bit. Sometimes she got a little jittery. You know, sometimes she'd be like moving her toys up into the frame, and we had to tell her, "Hey, Ryan, keep your arm down." But she was a good kid, man. She was a good kid. She was really talented, and she got some awards for performance in the film too, man. It really was great working with
That's
her.
incredible. Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah.
Sabrina, I know you got to see this one as well. Any thoughts that you have on it that you want to share with Ellis?
Yeah. Well, I think for being 4 minutes long, it is so incredibly moving in a very subtle way, because it's very accessible to its audience, and the story you're trying to tell and all the themes you're hitting in such a short period of time. What was it like kind of coming up with this idea and developing it and deciding how you're going to tell this particular story?
Yeah. So I actually took a lot of inspiration from the Florida Project when coming up with this particular story, as some of y'all can tell. I wrote it with the intention of shooting it in one of my film classes, but those people didn't vote my film in to shoot. So
we have to do that. I know what you're talking about for 290.
For 290. So
Yeah.
the way the class is structured, basically, at the end of the year, at the end of the semester, everyone writes a script, and then the whole class votes on it. And so 3 scripts get selected to shoot in a motel room.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to write a script that you can basically shoot in one location. And so I kind of wrote the script with the intention of like, okay, this is kind of going to be a banger, low key. I wrote the first draft maybe in like 30 minutes, and I was drawing upon a lot of themes from that movie, but also just like personally, that's my mom and I, honestly. Like, my family, we didn't really come from a lot of money, and so even though like that was a thing of ours, life didn't have to feel that way. Like sometimes there could be good moments, and And one thing in particular, there's a chord in there, like the more the emotional part is about the dad. And that in the Florida project, they don't mention anything about any form of father figure at all. And so I just felt like this is an opportunity for me to talk about some things that maybe young mothers, young women might go through in some of these particular tough situations, and trying to be a mom, and in some ways an adult figure, but also you're young, and how do you handle being a parent? And so so that kind of Grinch thing was a little bit of a analogy in terms of just trying to relate to a kid and trying to get on their level. You know what I mean?
I do gotta say, man, I feel extremely terrible that this beautiful movie didn't get picked for 290, and then my stupid sex comedy got picked.
Oh, that's right. You did shoot that in a motel, right?
Yeah, and it's terrible, and I hate it, and I hate the fact that it has like a stupid amount of views, but whatever. But I actually do gotta say, like, working on the set for this one, it was like such an intimate, like such like a quiet, like kind of set. Like it was really just me, you, Gabe, and then what? Like maybe Julia,
my buddy Abba. We only had like 5 or 6 crew people there, right?
Yeah. Do you think that's what helped like make the film feel so intimate, like in the final product? You know what I mean? Like,
shoot, maybe. Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think because we had an opportunity to just sort of be still and be quiet. And I remember when I approached Gabriel about the idea, I had very limited script coverage. I edit all of my films, so I have a pretty strong idea of how I want the cut to look. So Gabriel and I, we didn't have to do too much quote unquote exploring around. And so we had a very limited shot list. And that kind of allowed us to sort of be there within moments. And I think that the space sort of allowed for that opportunity. I really do feel like it was a very intimate environment because there wasn't a lot of people there. And I felt like the cast members, especially Ryan, felt very comfortable to be in that space.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? Because when you go to film school, there seems to be this kind of well-known thing of like, hey, every friend you make in film school is going to end up helping me make my films. Right. How's that like when you're starting to make friends with people who can be a gaffer or a PA or a sound editor or anything like that? How's that like?
Well, I will say the one thing about I've learned in film school, and this is what they don't really tell you, is I've learned that there's actually tiers to the friendships that you make in film school. And so if you're networking horizontally, like with friend groups, right, your opportunities are really going to be as high as the opportunities that your friends and your peers are getting. And so if you're, this is just fact. If you're in a friend group in film school and you struggling to find work and they're struggling to find work and you're not doing anything and they're not doing anything, and you didn't really make friends with the people who are doing a whole bunch of stuff and you're not collaborating with them, it's going to be a lot harder for you to find opportunities. And, and that automatically sounds like, oh man, you got to find the kid who's doing the thing, right? And you don't kind of want that mentality either. But I will say that very early on, I was fortunate that I got the opportunity to work with a guy like Gabriel. I'm not going to lie to you. I only reached out to him because I heard he had a really nice camera.
Gabe does have a really nice camera. Gabe has a really nice camera.
I found out that he owned his Blackmagic camera, and I was like, ooh, he going to make my films look good. But then Gabriel and I talked, and I found out just how much of a down-to-earth guy he is, and how great of a cinematographer he is, and how great of a friend he is, and how great of a collaborator he is. And Gabriel does a lot of amazing stuff. And I was just fortunate that he wanted to work on a couple of projects with me, man. I felt blessed, not the other way around, honestly. Yeah.
Gabe's that. I just want to jump in and say Gabe's that guy, man. I hope Gabe's listening. We got to send Gabe this episode. But he brought me on to help with you. So that's how we ended up meeting, was through Gabe, him being the DP, and me and Gabe being friends through our fraternity. So like you said, it's like you know, you don't go into film school being like, oh, I got to make friends with like the most popular people or the most like working people. You just go in to like make friends, and then the more friends you make, the more opportunities you have to meet other friends. So I appreciate meeting you, Ellis. I appreciate, you know, being tight with Gabe. I appreciate y'all helping me, y'all getting me to help out on Funky, which was the first time we met. And that I thought that was an amazing production and shoot and everything too, right there. That was a lot bigger than Crystal and Ray, but I thought it was amazing. I thought the whole experience, the whole weekend that we shot was amazing.
Which one was Funky?
Dope. Funky was a film about this young man named Clinton who doesn't really have strong dancing skills when he dances to like rap music, and when he changed the song to like a funky song, he can actually like really dance. And so that was a film that I wrote it maybe like March 2018, and then we ended up shooting in like February 2019. I brought Gabriel on as the DP sometime in the summer when we both officially got into. I wrote that before I got into the film school, and then when I officially got in, I collaborated with Gabriel. I hit him up, and so I sent him the script, and we kind of just went from there. I was really fortunate to work with RB and to get really great opportunities to just be able to tell that story. And what got me into filmmaking too is the writing aspect. So I really love to write. And so I felt like, dang, if I just have some compelling stories to tell, you know, I could wield that as a way of getting people to work with me. And so like, because when you're a film student, bro, you don't got no money.
Yeah.
You know, you have no money. And so that's just the name of the game. And so one way to get people to work with you is to get them to be a part of a project they're excited about, that they're like, oh man, I want to make this happen. Right. And that's the hardest part, man. I've just been fortunate that the ideas that I'm coming up with and the stuff that I like to write is also ideas that get people excited to want to come and collaborate. I'm just fortunate.
Yeah, I think that's the first thing I picked up when I started working at the production company that I came to when I moved to LA. So I moved to LA when I had a job secured and when I had a production company out there. And the first thing I learned was when writing scripts and with working with these guys, who every guy I worked with was a creative guy. And you know, in my brain, watching MCU, watching Marvel, growing up with like X-Men and all these movies, I'm like, bro, yo, I got a movie idea. It's a special ops unit. We're going to storm this building. And then you realize like that's not possible. That's never going to happen. And then the homies I made friends with and we would shoot short films are the films that were like, we need an office setting. This is an office. Let's use this. And we would ask permission and stuff like that. But learning the production angle of being a producer is the first thing I learned. But I want to go back to film school in general. Sabrina, what do you feel as far as wanting to go to film school and not taking advantage of that and not going there? Because I feel like with film school, and I'm going to toss it to you, Ellis, and RB3 in a sec, there's always like the pros and cons, right? Even me, I'm looking back at it just graduating college, and I'm feeling like I learned so much, not just in class, but mainly even outside of class, to be honest. But my thing is like, there's that outweighed with the con of having to pay your debts for the rest of your life, which is slowly what I'm realizing as a graduate is you're going to be buried in debt forever. But at the same time, you learn so much. So I don't know how you feel about that whole aspect and the idea of not going to film school.
Yeah, I would have loved it. Like, that would have definitely been my number one choice if I can, you know, if I had the money in the world. I know some people are fortunate enough to get support from their parents and things like that, and I just didn't have that. So it was something that was a realistic goal for me, was just to get a degree, which I got in marketing, which is not anything basically that I do right now, though, or that I plan on doing. It's just jobs that I've had since college to make ends meet in LA. And even for you guys, like the stuff I learned, and I applied it to social media for First Cut, and then I started out here. So it worked out for the best, but it's definitely, that's not my end goal. So at the end of the day, I'm still drowned in debt, not having a degree in like what I wanted to do. So looking back, it's definitely something that I wish I would have just done in the first place. And I think there's a lot of, for somebody who hasn't gone, so I can't speak on it completely. I think there are a lot of pros, which you guys have talked about, which is like networking, meeting people, even just the thought of, I know there's professors who work in the industry. And so you're learning from people who are hands on, have so much experience in that field already. And you're learning from people from all the stuff that they've done kind of over the years. So I think it's something that's really interesting and a lot to take into account when you're thinking about something like this. So like I would say, like if I could go back in time to myself, like I'd be like, hey, get serious and just go for it. Because either way, you're going to be drowned in debt. So you might as well get a degree in something that you really love and that you're passionate about. Because like throughout this time, I've taught myself about film and I've seen like online stuff about it, but it would have been cool to have that kind of hands-on experience.
Yeah. RB3,
Yeah.
how do you feel about the environment of a film school? And also, how do you feel about the whole idea of the debt versus how much you've learned, and if is it worth it, right?
Right. Well, I think that's a big worry for a lot of people going into film
is.
school. Like,
Right.
am I really going to pay? In the case of USC, am I really going to pay $70,000 a year for just to watch movies and make movies? Like on paper, that just doesn't sound like good at all. But it really is. I think the fortunate part about college is that like pretty much after you have a bachelor's degree, you could kind of go into any kind of field because you have like a general knowledge of a lot of things. So like, so even though film school is like an overwhelming financial burden, you still have some credentials to carry you into something. And, me and Ellis see it all the time. A lot of people who go to film school don't go into film. Like a lot of people go into, marketing. A lot of people go into law. Like a lot of people go into a lot of different areas outside of filmmaking or outside of the film industry because that's just what's available. Now I'm of the very rare and very fortunate and very blessed breed to where like I got a scholarship, so I don't have to worry about the debt as much. But I know for like when my family wanted me to do engineering and I wanted to do film, the agreement for me doing film was, okay, you could go to film school, but we're not paying for it. So, so I literally went and applied for every single scholarship that was out there, and until I was able to pay for most of it. And of course, I still have like a little bit of student loan debts, but I was fortunate enough to like not totally be drowned in it. But yeah, that debt is a real concern for a lot of people, and I think it's important.
Yeah. Ellis?
Yeah, man. A whole lot to unpack there, but I will say that I too was fortunate that I didn't have to pay for my time in film school. I got a lot of scholarship money. One in particular I got was from the Jackie Robinson Foundation.
Hey,
Yeah, Jackie Robinson. I'm
Yeah.
forever indebted to him and his wife.
Yeah.
for
You
all
got
the
Jackie Robinson,
support.
I got Bill Gates. It's all the same.
Okay,
It's all the same.
I didn't get that one. So good for you, RB.
I'm
But
not trying to brag.
that was a flex. He flexed. But anyway, I felt like I was fortunate that I got to go to film school, and I definitely think that for a lot of students who don't have those connections, I think film school is a very necessary thing to do. And I also feel like, to be honest, not all film schools are created equal,
Yes.
and that's
Yes.
just the truth. There are many film schools out there that I feel like, to be honest, I'm not gonna name any names, but I just feel like there are some film schools out there where you're better off saving your money and going out there and doing the thing yourself. And I think there are very few film schools, and I think USC is one of them. I think they're the best one for a reason, where you probably get the most bang for your buck, where you're not only being able to make films with a bunch of great people, whether they're in your program or not, but you also get the opportunity to have a bunch of resources that other film schools don't get to have, including job opportunities and alumni connections. And that's huge. Like, that's huge for going to film schools, to be able to get work afterwards. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that there's not a lot of schools that can really tell you, "Yay, we can help you get an opportunity after school." I just feel like USC is one of those few film schools where you can get opportunities after school. And I think some schools that aren't able to fully provide you with those same opportunities.
Yeah, that's such a good point considering you guys, I mean, are in Los Angeles, right? It's the whole idea of like
Right.
we're in the hub of film, we're in Hollywood, and we're doing film school at the same time. So
Right.
when it comes to what I mean, RB3 and I have talked about the exclusivity of filmmaking, and that's why it's usually rich white guys or just white
Right.
guys in general, is because their parents pay for the cameras and the lights and all that stuff. Versus in Los Angeles, you have access to more equipment than you probably would if you went to a school in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, and the sad part about it, I'm gonna just jump in real quick. The sad part about it is there are people in film school who do have both the connections and the nepotism and the family stuff and the money, and they're in film school, so they kind of, there is still like an unfair advantage. Like there's levels to it, right? Like there's people who come into film school, who are like 10 times ahead. And then there's people like me who come from Compton and didn't really have like as much like, experience or connections or anything like that. And you kind of have to wing it, to some extent. And I know the same goes for Ellis. You're being someone from San Jose who, came in, especially for somebody who's a transfer, right? Like that had to be like, tell us about your transition coming into the major, and did you like, how do you allocate to the environment?
Yeah, man. So I went to the University of San Francisco my freshman year of college, and I studied history there. And I'm really blessed to be able to have gone to USF for a year. And then I transferred to USC as a history major. At the time, it made the most financial sense for me, and it was just something that I always like really wanted to do. And so I just made the leap. I went to USC, and I got there, and I realized that I don't think I was doing whatever it is I wanted to do. And I'd taken a film class in high school. I'd taken a film class when I was a freshman in college, and then I took a creative writing class my sophomore year, first semester at SC. And then I just kind of decided, like, I had a roommate, and he convinced me to apply to the film school. He had transferred in. He actually went to UCLA and transferred to the film school at SC. But we don't talk about that. But he was the one who told me, dude, you really like film, bro. Go and pursue it. And I was very terrified about the idea of just taking that leap, and I didn't know if I was going to succeed or not. And I felt like when I got there, though, like I really felt like I was in my element. Like I felt like I was able to take really dope classes. I was able to learn a lot more than I would have ever learned on my own. And I really got to give a shout out to the Cinema and Media Studies program at USC, because I think we'll have an opportunity to talk about it later. But I think learning filmmaking is so crucial in film school. I also think studying filmmaking is super crucial in film school. That's like where you get professors, you get TAs, you get people talking about social impacts of film, cultural impacts of film, films from a historical context. Like I just think you make better films if you have that kind of context. Then I mean, I've seen people in the production program. I just don't feel a lot of their films are well informed.
Oh, somebody said it. Somebody said it, man. I'm glad somebody said it. You know what I mean? Like
yes. I truly do feel that way. Like there's no means. Like you just went out and did it, and I think that's great. But honestly, I feel like anybody can go out and do something, right? But to do something with meaning, I think is way more critical. And I remember Kevin Feige came on a Q&A recently, and he mentioned how although he liked his production classes, he found way more out of his cinema and media studies class that he took at his time at US.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Final thing I want to toss it to you guys about is the idea of, I mean, you guys mentioned it pretty much the whole time, but the idea of USC Film School in general and what makes it stand out besides the obvious fact of being in Los Angeles. And I'll toss it to you first, RB3, because this was in your notes. So talk to me about why USC.
Again, like I said, well, for me personally, it was the John Singleton connection. I just related a lot to his story. But I think USC is just like an historic film school. They kind of created the archetype of film schools, honestly. The USC film program was created from actually the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences because they were trying to figure out ways to institute new filmmakers into the industry. So then it became, they're basically training people to become directors back in like in the late 40s, early 50s. And then later on, as transitions continued to happen, we started seeing more and more. We started seeing more and more independent filmmakers come out of USC, like George Lucas, not specifically speaking to USC, but film school in general, right? Like that whole generation of Spielberg, Scorsese, Coppola, exactly, UCLA. So there's like a whole wave of people who are coming out of film school and ready to start making cinema. And that's kind of, I think that also boosted the kind of gravitas and the kind of reputation that film school ended up having. But yeah, I think it's always been a quintessential part of the film industry. And I think, especially in USC, it being perhaps the closest to Hollywood, frankly, out of any other college, besides maybe UCLA's maybe a little geographically closer. But I think, but USC has always had that like Hollywood connection, always had that LA connection, has always had that connection, like deeply, deeply rooted, not just in filmmakers, but in producers and editors and cinematographers and crew people. There's like the USC DNA kind of sprinkled throughout a lot of the film industry. So I think that's why it's really important. That's why it was really important for me to go there. And I think that's why it's important as it is right now.
And USC, I'm sorry, but USC, like they teach you how to do it the right way. And I really benefited a lot from having friends in the film school because that's how I learned filmmaking. I didn't know how to do it any other way than how my friends from USC were taught how to do it. So I feel like I was never one of those kids who just picked up a camera and just went out and shot something. Like I learned, I cut my teeth on shot listing, and doing lighting, and getting an AD and crew calls and all that kind of stuff. And setups, that's how I learned how to do it from the most professional way possible. And that's a true benefit to going to a school like USC. They really teach you how to do it professionally, honestly.
Yeah, that's amazing. And obviously, Sabrina and I are like super jealous right now.
I'm sorry.
If you can't tell. But either way, guys, we're going to go to break real quick. After the break, we're going to be talking about our favorite USC grads, as well as the idea of film school as a whole when it comes to the impact of the kind of movies that we see. So make sure you guys stick around.
This ain't funny, so don't you dare laugh. With the 4/5 divide you in half. You getting at me equals a bloodbath. You do the math, take you out the equation. This ain't funny, so don't you dare.
Check out this clip from our First Cut live stream from this Wednesday. Enjoy.
So for anyone who doesn't know, we're obviously lined up with Geeks of Color, which is Dorian Parks' amazing site. Shout out to Dorian Parks. Dorian, he appears and reappears every month or so.
Like a gopher.
Yeah.
Just goes and then goes away. Yeah.
Homie is like a spirit. He just like pops in and pops out. But we're associated with Geeks of Color, and we now have an official website where you can find our links to everything we do. You can find our conversations. We have a nice little banner that has our faces on it. So we want to utilize that. We want to hopefully send that to people who don't know who we are, and we can say, hey, we're official. We're not just random people talking through Zoom about movies. We're like sort of official.
But no, you're random people talking through Zoom about movies with the website. That's what you are.
Website.
Yeah.
That's right. We have a website. Check out our new website on geeksofcolor.co/first-cut to check out our reviews, our videos, and articles that pertain to everything First Cut related. Check it out.
Come along, children. Now we're going to have a little music.
What is up, guys? We're back talking about film school with Ellis. Let me do it, man. The big question in the room, the one that you had in your notes, RB3, I'm going to ask it now just because I feel like what a better way to come back from break. Is film school necessary? Is it the way to go if you're going to be a filmmaker? So if I want to be a filmmaker, do I have to go to film school? RB3.
Now that's a tough question. I think there's a lot like of layers to it. I think there are paths for people who don't go to film school to be in the film industry. There are paths for people who go to film school and don't end up being in the industry, right? I think what film school offers, the networking opportunities that makes the industry a lot more accessible, and it offers the resources to make filmmaking more accessible, like at a younger age. Now, that being said, though, is it ultimately worth the money? Well, from my experience, yes. Like for me, I think I net benefited from going to USC. I think I met enough, not just enough. Like I met a lot of great people. I met a lot of awesome people like Ellis and like my boy Cade and like and everybody who I've met over the years have just been amazing people who have really helped me along in my journey and my self growth and my self discovery. So I think on that level, it definitely is worth it. Now, is it necessary? Well, not necessarily, because like there are plenty of examples of people who don't go to film school and still make it. Now, are those examples super rare? Of course. Like there is like, there's only one Tarantino like of every generation who could like bust through that mode. And for frankly, a lot of times you see other people who don't go to film school and still end up having careers are people who usually are somebody's cousin or somebody's daughter or somebody's nephew or something like that. Like that's usually who are the type of people who cannot go to film school and can still get a career in the industry. So, but I think if you're somebody like me who had no kind of connections, no kind of resources, and needed a place to grow and to learn and to study film, I think is definitely necessary on that level. But if you have some sort of industry connections, or if you have an abundance of money, or if you have like, if you have your own like personal film library at home that you want to look through and study through, it's not really necessary, but it's definitely highly recommended for sure.
What do you think, Ellis?
Yeah, man. I think for me, film school probably wasn't necessary. I could have figured a lot of stuff out. I have figured a lot of stuff out without film.
Yeah.
But I definitely don't feel like it's necessary, but I do feel like it is necessary for a certain group of people. And I think the best thing I think about film school is just the opportunity to meet like-minded individuals and to also be under a structure where it's just, hey, yo, we're just out here just making films. Like there's no the stakes aren't high. The stakes are not high. And I think film school allows you to do that. Like you're in there, you're in class learning about filmmaking. You may get assignments where you get to actually go and do it. The stakes should be very low. You're not out there trying to make the next Oscar-winning short film.
Yeah.
You're just out there just trying to learn and get better. And I think that's the best thing about film school. And I think some folks need to be in an environment where they just get to go and do it. I know one of my favorite filmmakers, Ryan Coogler, he went to film school for that particular reason, because of the fact that he's never done it before. And so he needed to go to film school to go out and just do it. I wouldn't say it's necessary, but I think that it can be a strong help for sure for a group of people.
Yeah, Sabrina, as someone, obviously we've talked about us not going to film school, but at the same time wanting to do something in the industry, what are your thoughts on this, especially as someone who's kind of trying to get their footing in the Hollywood industry of movies?
I think it's definitely something that's beneficial if it kind of fits into your particular mold of the path that you want to go into. But I think honestly, number one is just kind of passion and a love for something is just something that kind of really drives you forward. Because just because you go to film school and just because you learn all of that, if you don't put your heart and soul into something, no matter what you're studying, no matter what you're doing, how far can you possibly go? True. So I feel like that's a really, really great asset for sure. And obviously, Ellis and RB3 are doing absolutely incredible. But for for my kind of thing, because I've always just been a writer and I've always been writing, I never studied anything having to do with writing, but it's something that I do all the time. And I'm very confident in it, and that's something that I want to continue to do going forward. So for anybody who just can't go to film school or doesn't feel like that's the right path for them, I feel like is whatever it is that you want to do, just put your heart and soul behind it. And I think it can kind of push you forward in that way, because I accidentally landed here doing this with you guys, and I absolutely love it. I love it so much. It's the highlight of my week. Like, it completely changed my life, and it gives me a whole new perspective talking to every time we have a special guest on, or just even talking to you guys every single week, depending on the subject. And I've learned so much being surrounded by you guys and other people kind of in this space. So I'm grateful for all of that, and I'm grateful that I have that as well. But yeah, so I want to take all of this going forward and just kind of put my passion and drive behind it, because I want to go into screenwriting. I'm like working on that kind of stuff. So
Nice.
yeah, so that's really exciting. And that's actually something I wanted to say earlier. I love the dialogue in your short film. So that's cool that you said you wanted to go into the screenwriting program first, because that's something that I looked at when I was going to see if I was going to go into film school, was screenwriting, like doing that. And yeah, so I think it probably would have been beneficial for me, but at the end of the day, it really is just how much passion you have for something, and that kind of pulls you forward.
Yeah, it's so interesting talking to you guys, obviously because I'm learning, and obviously because I want to hear your perspective. But another thing is, like, the more I think about my story personally, this is me, right? Like, the way I came out here, got a job in a production company. I literally got the full, like, ghetto version of filmmaking.
Yeah.
Where it's like I learned how to be a producer because I was put in a production role.
Right.
Learn how to gaff, shoot, pull focus, move camera, dolly shots, all that jazz because I was there. I learned how to write because I failed a million times and my writing sucked until eventually I got pretty good. And I worked for people who did it for a living. And they would tell me, like, hey, do this, hey, do that. The good, keep doing this. I got the full hands-on experience of what it is to work inside the industry. I worked in television production, which is kind of different. But at the same time, it's one of those things where it's like, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, wow, I've been an AD for a few commercials, a few short films, and I didn't go to film school.
Yeah.
But again, that's production, right? Where it's one of those things where you start to learn, like, what does an AD do? What is the process of it? What is the main goal of it? What's your role with the producer? What's your role with the director? And that's what I learned hands-on as I failed and kept getting back up. But that's my experience, right? Where it's like, not everyone has that same experience of working in the industry. And now I can happily say that I still work in the industry, even though right now it's pretty dormant, obviously because of COVID. But yeah, it's wild. My brother and I both have that, because my brother did the same thing where he just came out here and started learning on his feet. And now he shoots commercials for a living.
Yeah.
And he does music videos too, because he came out here for hip hop. And then that's how we got into the whole music video industry and eventually being behind the camera.
Well, it's funny too, because when of course, like when you think about film school, you think about like the classes, and you think about like, whatever your perception of film school is. But really the most valuable learning experience you can have is life. And I think, even down to the level of like writing and having and being able to write, like you have to have some sort of life experience to like kind of draw from, and something to kind of take inspiration from. And that's something that everybody has. So you don't necessarily need to go to film school to find your voice and find your passion and find your story. Right. That story's already inside of you. Film school just helps you get it out and helps you tell that story a little bit with, maybe some resources and maybe some people and some crew. But you don't need that. Like, that's not the necessary part. Who you are as a filmmaker and as a storyteller will not change based on how many ever years you're gonna be in film school. You'll learn how to do things technically better and how to execute better and how to be better on set and how to, do all the processes better, but it's not going to help you tell a better story. So
No, it's not. It's not going to teach you how to. It's not going to teach you how to like find that story. It's not going to. It's not going to teach you how to turn a bad story into a great one. Like that's something that you either have or you got to work. You got to work to build that up. A lot of it does come down to personal stuff, and I was an RA on campus, and I had some of the students who I was my residents. They were in the film school, and I always told them because they saw my short film Funky and they really liked it. I just said, dude, go out and live life. Like that's how you tell those kind of stories. Like go and live life, have some experiences, have something to say, man. Like you're not gonna do it standing watching a bunch of movies all day long. You're not gonna do it talking to your friends about movies all day long, right? You're not gonna do it being on a film set all day long. You're gonna do it by living life. And that's how you really get to tell those kind of really cool stories, in my opinion, honestly.
Yeah, and it goes back to the idea of like school in general, right? I mean, college in general, I guess I should say, is the idea of like, what do I learn when I'm in school? I'm learning what's in the classroom, but I'm also learning about people from different backgrounds. I can't tell you, I met this huge, an ASU West, where I went to school, because I went to Tempe first and then West. I saw this huge Muslim community out here, like a massive Muslim community. And then I learned about that because I've never grown up around Muslims before. So I got that experience. And then I got experience from people from different backgrounds all over the world, explaining to me their perspective on life and world politics and everything like that. Those are the kind of things that I will always cherish, and I will always feel like made me a better person and a smarter person, because I got to learn not everything is through my point of view and through my narrow lens of how life is. And those are things you learn in college, and you can use that to make films, right? Because that's the idea of like, now from what I've learned through talking to people and through learning in class, I can take this knowledge and make something different, unique, interesting, that could show a different perspective. That's always been my thing, right? Where it's like, if I'm doing something, I'm trying to show, like I've told you, RB3, a homeboy from Iowa, if you see a Mexican homie do something cool, maybe you're going to think Mexican homies are cool versus someone picking up the trash, or being a thug, or thug one or thug two. If I see, if I'm some homie from Iowa and I'm grown up around this giant white community, I'm going to have those same stereotypes keep enforcing into my head. So I've always wanted to break that. And I think film is one of the best ways to teach. And again, I go back to that Bruce Lee documentary we saw, RB3, but when he says, I wanted to teach people about the Asian way and my Asian culture, and the best way I learned how to do that was through film. And I was like, wow, I've never heard it said like that, but that's literally what he did. Yeah, and that's just the power of filmmaking, man. I love it. But I want to switch it real quick. But you guys are behind the camera filmmakers, which is a different story, because again, when you come to LA, and I think all of us have been in LA long enough to know, the first thing that comes up is like, oh, I'm an actor. Oh, I'm an actor.
Right.
So it's like, I'm so curious about acting, because I've seen like shows about like people who want to be actors and stuff, but what is the process like if someone wants to be an actor? Do you feel like film school is necessary? Either one of you guys can take it.
Ooh, Ellis?
Oh man. I have to say, specifically as someone as being on behind the camera where I get to cast folks, no one has ever used any cachet of where they went to school that helped them get an acting role.
Wow.
Never happened. At the end of the day, like what gets them an acting role is their headshot, their reel, and their talent, right?
Yeah.
And their audition. And it doesn't matter where they came from. I mean, I know I have friends who act in our drama school, but that doesn't necessarily give them a leg up for me to cast them. But the only thing that gives you a leg up is if you can play the part. That's really all it is. I think acting is very. I think it's a little bit different.
It is, right?
I really think so. You know, you just kind
Yeah.
of got to put yourself out there and try to get continue to audition and continue to go for every single opportunity that you can kind of get your hands on. Honestly. That you can
Yeah.
go.
I feel like before it tells it to you, RB3, I feel like each and every one of us at one point, I'm throwing you under the bus, Ellis, has considered acting or has thought about it for a second. You're like, I could do that, and then you're
Yeah.
like, nah, I don't want to do it.
I have a role in my short film.
Oh, you go.
Funky, yeah, I remember that. I
I
remember
acted
that.
in my short film. I haven't given up on my acting dreams yet. I haven't given
Oh,
up
there you
on
go.
but only until I find the role that's best for me, where I can
Oh,
flourish and blossom.
There you
Uh-huh.
go.
But yeah, but I feel like everyone wants to be an actor. Everyone wants to be in front of the camera. You know, it's
Yeah.
such a pleasing thing to do, right? It looks like it's cool.
yeah. Sabrina, I'm gonna toss it to you. Have you ever considered acting?
Oh gosh, when I was like a little kid, and then
Yeah.
and then I was like, yeah, when I was really really young. Well, I was in like choir and theater and stuff like
Okay.
that up until like early like sophomore year of high school. But then after that, I was kind of like, okay, I'm gonna be one of those people like I'd rather be like behind the camera or like behind the scenes. So that's kind of how I switched. Like I went from doing theater to doing like film photography and being in like video club and like film and everything like that in high school. And it was just kind of like ever since then it was a no, and I hadn't even been on camera until I started
Wow.
doing this with you guys. And then we did that audition together, you and I, and I
Oh, yeah,
remember
we did.
when they reached out to me for that audition, I was like, because they're like, oh, headshots, everything. I was like, I don't have that. I was like, this isn't what I was like, I didn't need to do-
Instagram?
yeah, I'm like, you want to see this pic? That was it. It was super crazy, and that was the first time where I had thought recently. So just a few months ago, because this was back in October, November. I was like, maybe I should take like improv classes. Maybe I should take some type of acting class to get more comfortable back doing that, because I think it's something that's kind of a really cool skill to have for like hosting or anything like that. It's something that's really interesting. But then at the end of the day, with the question you had about acting, I feel like again it goes back down to like the passion, because I have a bunch of friends in LA who are actors. You know, we made a joke about that. A lot of people come out here, possibly for acting, and then maybe find some other passion
Sure.
besides that one. But for anybody who does want to act, it really goes down to like work ethic in this town, like in LA. From what I know from my friends, like one of my friends, Jeff, literally just got casted in a feature, and he's been working for he's great, and he's been working for so long to get that, and he never stopped. His grind never stopped. He worked other gigs. He's been doing stuff throughout this time. He's 27 and he just got his first feature, and so it takes time. So it's just kind of one of those things where it's like, don't give up, be passionate. He never went to acting school, but he did go to acting classes, so that was just something that he's kind of naturally good at. So
Yeah. It's so crazy. It's so interesting how people can dive into that. Two of my best friends out here in LA, my roommate actually, who I consider to be one of my best friends, is a really good actor. My homeboy Leo, who I've wanted to bring on this podcast forever, is a real good actor. But what makes them different is because when we worked at the production company, we were writers and people who wanted to write. And that's how we got the whole idea of like, well, I'm going to write something to put myself in it, was my boys Leo's idea behind it. But yeah, it's one of those things where I have a slightly different background because I have a musical theater background, which I always talk about, but I have to do it, which makes me comfortable in front of the stage and in front of people. I'm not shy in that way.
no, you're not.
But that does not give me. I know you're just like, man, this boy won't shut up.
I'm
But
jealous.
it does not give me a leg up in front of the camera. I can tell you that. I get way more nervous in front of the camera than in front of like a crowd of like 5,000 people. Yeah, that's just me though. RB3, you're an actor.
Wait, since when have I been an actor? I don't know. I did want to be an actor. Again, everybody like you said, Ace, I wanted to be an actor when I was a little kid. Obviously
I
not
wanted
now.
to be a ninja, just in martial arts movies.
Yeah, no, literally,
That's it.
literally want to be like Tom Cruise or something. But but you know, I actually think classes is better than like a school going to school for acting. Now that being said, though, there are a lot of great people from my fraternity DKA who are actors in our fraternity, and that's really great for us because we have like a fraternity full of actors and writers and directors and creators, like it really gave it a really beautiful, like flourishing kind of environment for us. So I think that was great on that level. But I definitely think improv classes, like I want to take an improv class. I've been actually
me too.
Very recently I've been researching like improv classes. I think that would just be, I think just for not even trying to be an actor, just for fun, like just for fun, having fun and being part of the creative process in other ways. And like I think for me personally, when I was in high school, like I told you guys, I went to California Academy of Math and Science High School. Very math, science, engineering.
Artsy.
Yeah. Very artsy indeed. Where we literally only had like 3 art classes: art, drama, and dance. Which I was an active participant in all 3.
Oh yeah.
But I did drama for like all 4 years of high school, and I feel like that helped me, at least at some level, get a better understanding of how to communicate with actors, how to like talk to actors, how to like block out scenes, you know what I mean? So I think that, just having just some sort of, acting background as a filmmaker and as a director is extremely helpful too. So I'd even encourage young filmmakers out there who want to be filmmakers, just maybe stick your head into an acting program or a class or or maybe a theater group or an improv group, and you just have as much fun as they're having, and you might have fun on your movies too.
I have that same sentiment. Like that's something that I want to do. Maybe we should take the same improv class, RB. Let's learn some acting.
Yeah,
Sabrina, you gonna be there?
All of us. All
right, we're all doing it together. But I think for me at least, it's so important to know about acting. Even though I'm not an actor myself, I watch a bunch of actors' videos they talk about their craft, talk about their technique. They talk about what it means to perform under the camera, listening to a director, collaborating. I think all of those types of videos and that type of information, talking with actors, is super important to have that knowledge, because part of your job as a filmmaker is to have that collaboration with actors. So it helps to just go out and do it. Honestly, like I like this is me saying I'm still trying to take an acting class, and I want to learn more about the craft of acting and to be able to talk with actors and work with actors, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely think it's worth it. It's always tough, right? Because they're not cheap. As someone who's done acting classes with my boy, I give him another shout out, Leo and Brent. I went to an acting class. Their acting class, they invited me to that free set. I was like, if it's free, I'm there. But yeah, it's definitely something that is not cheap, which is another conversation within itself. But I want to gear the conversation, at least towards the end of this episode, towards the legacy of filmmaking, and specifically USC Film School. And I know this was something that you had in your notes, RB3, when you were talking about the elevation of film students coming out of film school and making new, different, independent style movies, specifically from USC RB3.
You're right. No, I think that's always been kind of a landmark of what USC has always represented, or just film school represented in general. Like I said, like it was originally founded as USC film program was originally founded by the Academy to recruit young talent, and that's what eventually ended up doing. But like when we talk about film history like all the time on this podcast, like in the 50s and the 60s, we kind of saw the end of the golden age of Hollywood and the beginning of like this kind of renaissance. And a lot of that was carried out through film school graduates, what they call like the film school brats or whatever. Right. Like I mentioned, the first half, Lucas, Spielberg. And I reference those two because they have the 2 biggest buildings at the USC film program. If you literally go to USC, there's one ginormous mansion-looking, castle-looking building that says the Spielberg building, and another castle that says Lucas building. Yeah. So those are always just my 2, go-to for film school. But of course, like, Coppola, Brian De Palma, like we said, Martin Scorsese, all coming out of different film schools from different places and telling these like really involved, very personal, very kind of intimate and gritty and unique, independently driven films that frankly took Hollywood by storm. And then in the 70s, when all these people became super successful, like with Jaws, with Taxi Driver, with De Palma having Carrie, Coppola having The Godfather, like literally there was like a moment in the 70s where all of these super cool and weird independent filmmakers ended up having like blockbusters level of success, which totally changed the name of the game to where, you know, Spielberg became his own brand. Lucas became Star Wars. Coppola is, you know, he has literally a family of people behind him. So it, you know, and then it just builds that repertoire for film school going forward, even to the point where I mentioned, like, you know, before, you know, John Singleton. Another favorite black filmmaker of mine is Rick Famuyiwa, who did Dope and The Woods, and he also just did a couple episodes in The Mandalorian. Another USC cinema and media studies graduate as well. And yeah, I mean, the list goes on. John Chu from USC, most recently too, Step Up 3D. I know me and Sabrina love Step Up 3D. And In the Heights and Crazy Rich Asians, of course. Ron Howard, USC graduate. So
Ryan Johnson.
Ryan Johnson. Yeah, Coogler. Like the list of
Robert
Zemeckis. Yeah, again, who also has a giant building at USC too. Yep. Yeah, so there's like, again, like there's tons, like hundreds of filmmakers who come out of USC because it's just been, like I said, embedded in the DNA of Hollywood. So we see a lot of these filmmakers have a lot more opportunities coming out of USC because of that.
Yeah, and it's continuing, right? I mean, obviously you guys have mentioned Coogler quite a bit, but I feel like he's kind of the best shining example of what a successful film student can become, going from, you know, Sundance all the way to Black Panther, and the idea of how someone like a Ludwig Göransson, for example, who also does the score for The Mandalorian and who won the Oscar for Black Panther, came from that film school style environment of learning from each other and growing with each other. Yeah, where do you think this is going, Ellis? Do you think people are going to keep coming out of film school with crazy new ideas?
I think that's a loaded question, but I think it's tough to say. I think there's a problem with film school right now. And I think the biggest problem is film school was created, as Arby mentioned, for accessibility because there was no other place to do it. So you kind of had to go to film school if you wanted to do something. Nowadays, you know, anyone can, you know, you can pay for a camera, you can shoot on your iPhone, right? Like the idea of going to film school is weighing much more on people. Like, it's not necessarily like I have to anymore, as we were just talking about. Is it even necessary? And I feel like film school in general and USC, the type of students they're preparing students to go and get an industry related job, right? And at the end of the day, like, I feel like there was once a time where you could probably go to film school and it could launch your potential career to become the next big director or whatever. I don't think that's the role of film school anymore. I think if you want to become a director, if that's what you want to do, you want to become the next big producer, like you start at the bottom just like anybody else, and you kind of gotta work the way. It don't really matter if you went to film school or not. And the truth is, like, that's not how people end up getting opportunities like that. You know, Ryan Coogler, he got opportunities because he was a really exceptional director while he was in film school. But Ryan Coogler, he's exceptional, man. Like he's a different story. Like, they just don't really do things like that anymore. Like the way it happened for him, honestly. Oh, what you want, dog? Oh, it's my dog, by the way.
No worries.
We have a guest. This is Star.
Oh, look how tiny.
Yeah, she's tiny.
My dog's outside this room too, so you'll hear her a few times.
But what do you think about the RB, about like the idea of like film school and its impact going forward? You know.
No, you're actually 100% right. I think that's kind of the shifting evolution of what film schools become, because particularly if you go to USC, like, they don't encourage you to like be a director. They don't encourage you to be like a writer or a producer or anything. They really encourage you to be like a cinematographer or an editor or a sound person or a production designer. Like they push you towards those fields mainly because like that's what can get you like in the door, you know. And I think the USC priority, I think what Ellis is talking about like is 100% true. Like everybody has to start at the bottom. I think what USC does is like they give you the doorway to the bottom. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, and people, and it's up to people and it's up to individuals to take that next step and build up beyond getting past the bottom and getting out of that. And it's tough for some people. Some people don't have it. Some people are comfortable being, a production person. Or a lot of times when we see cinema and media studies majors, they go on to be like agents or managers or, working at agencies or doing script coverage, leading to like, script jobs and all that kind of stuff like that. And people are comfortable with that. And then there's the rare breed of people, like I mentioned before, like the Rick Famigulers, like the Ryan Cooglers, like the Ryan Johnsons, are the people who decide to take that extra step beyond that and take their films into their own hands. And I think, that's why, I salute somebody like my boy Ellis here, because, he really just over, like, I didn't even know you were a transfer, dog. I thought you were always there at USC, but like, having the initiative and the drive to just work and do your own original stuff and do your own original films and your own original content, that's what pushes you to the next level. It's coming from the bottom and working and grinding like everybody else, but it's also taking that extra step and making those extra leap forwards are the important things. And that's what the notable alumni from USC do. That's what I think the culture at USC is very conducive to. I think even though they push you towards more industry standard jobs, they do also show you and they push you to, hey, if you have a voice, if you have a story to tell it, and we'll help you tell it in whatever way you can. Right. And I think that's important. I think that's honestly the most important part to me. So that's why I appreciated my time there. And I think, when thinking about somebody like a Coogler who, and also too, there's also a different conversation about undergrad versus graduate school, right? Coogler went to grad school, Ryan Johnson went to grad school, George Lucas went to grad school. The grad school program is definitely something that's more indicative towards pushing for a bigger part in the industry, as opposed to undergrad. But it's the same thing. It's like there's a lot of people who go to graduate. Kevin Feige, I think, also went to graduate school too.
He went to undergrad.
Oh, he went to undergrad. There you go. But see, there's a lot of people who just go to school and just like, oh, I made it because I finished film school. But no, it's the extra steps beyond that's important too. So
yeah, and it's always a conversation. RB3, you and I have this all the time about where film is going, right? Obviously, I have some thoughts as far as where it's going now with COVID and with theater closures and what's going to happen to the theater industry, which isn't necessarily the studio industry and streaming, for example, because streaming seems to be the place where things are popping off now as far as quality, as far as smaller movies, independent movies. But there is a conversation to be had, and I kind of want to toss it to you, Sabrina, about this, where what Ellis was saying about anyone can do it now. You don't have to have the training in the background and the classes and the knowledge. Does that create, and I'm not saying you were saying this, Ellis, I'm just kind of thinking it to myself, does that create like a watering down of quality where people aren't necessarily making the best stuff and that's not necessarily rising to the surface? Because I feel like maybe because we're in this, you, me, and RB3, Sabrina, are in this kind of like online criticism where you're not a film critic, but you're a film person that talks about film critics. Like, it's this weird thing that we're a part of that a lot of people have been outspoken against because of this whole idea, like Twitter warriors who can just say this movie sucks even though it's a great movie. Does that change the palette of the audience, having people not going to film school?
I think it's definitely an interesting thing to kind of look at different examples, because something Ellis mentioned was, anyone could shoot on an iPhone. And I'm not aware if Sean Baker did go to film school, but I know he shot Tangerine on an iPhone.
Yeah.
And it's something that's really interesting, and it is so accessible to so many people. And I don't think it's watering down. I definitely think it's really cool because then we can have a wider range of voices. I think in the world that we are in today, and kind of with streaming and all the different platforms that host different voices and different filmmakers and things like that, we're getting a lot more diverse in filmmaking, a lot more diverse in storytelling just in general versus like 40 years ago. And so I don't think it's a watering down in quality so much, just because I feel like if it's not good, people just don't really pay attention to it. It's something interesting that I also talked about with Josh Trank, because he didn't go to film school, he didn't go to college at all, and he had a viral YouTube clip that led to him getting on like a Spike TV show and then going to make Chronicle. And it's just something like, there's this like weird, unfortunate, like series of, not unfortunate, but series of events that kind of lead to some people finding their path and finding their voice. And so I actually really enjoy what's happening right now, just because of that diversity and kind of all the stories that we're getting, everything we can consume. I really like it.
You know, I think on that point, I will say that there does become an oversaturation of the market just because there's so much more of it, right? And I think what it does, though, is it makes it harder for voices to be heard, like the strongest ones to be heard, right? And I feel, I'll take me as an example, where I think I make really great work, but at the same time, it's hard to get that work out there through the non-traditional ways. Usually you get noticed by either like getting into a prestigious film festival, or having a manager friend, or knowing someone in the industry and being able to like show your work to them. Like, those avenues are still there, and people don't necessarily like put in the work unless you know you got a YouTube video and it just went viral, millions of people saw it, right? It still is hard for some people of talent to get noticed, and I think I think it's a side effect of the oversaturation of the market, because anybody can do it, right? That also means that it's going to be harder for people to find those gems, whereas you had your traditional ways to do it, where you knew, okay, you went to film school, you gonna come out, we gonna give you an opportunity, or you got your film in a Sundance, right? We know you're that guy, or we think you are, right? There still are those superficial ways that you still kind of, I feel like you have to go through, regardless of how much opportunity you get, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it also opens up this conversation that I was listening to in another podcast called The Big Picture. Shout out to Sean and Amanda, who talked about this year, for example, the idea that pretty much every movie this year is going to be video on demand, and we're not getting film festivals, which means which means people who are judging what is a good movie aren't doing that anymore, because we're not having the Sundance selections and the buzz from TIFF and all this other stuff, and it's just going to be which one is the best movie. No hype, no, critically approved, no Sundance selection. It's just the best movie that happens to be video on demand rises to the surface, and maybe that's a good thing that we don't have this selection of what is quality and what isn't quality, and we can just let the people decide if something like A First Cow, for example, is the best movie of the year, or King of Staten Island, or whatever the kind of movie it is, just rises to the top naturally without having that selection process be part of it. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, RB3.
No, absolutely. I 100% agree. I think that is, okay. I think they're, I think having a more unbiased, a more even playing field for films and for film goers and for film critics does open up a lot of opportunities. I do agree with Ellis. There is like an oversaturation. Like it does make it tough to kind of shine amongst like the crowd right now. But I think that's where, I think that's a difficulty that's been in Hollywood for a long time, and I think is becoming exacerbated. And I think that the method, I personally think, of overcoming that is streaming, is video on demand, is all of these different platforms, because it gives choice, right? And I think at the end of the day, like, there's that phrase, that's the expression in basketball that we, ball don't lie. Like, ball don't lie. And the best films and the best filmmakers and the best voices are always going to figure out a way to bowl you up to the top eventually. It might not happen immediately, it might not happen like overnight, but I think if somebody is as great of a filmmaker as they believe they are, and they have as much confidence, and they have the talent to back it, and they have the resources to back it, I think eventually we'll see a climb happen. Eventually, it just takes time.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Any closing thoughts, Ellis? Obviously, thank you so much for your time, man. I know we went a little longer than I thought, but I appreciate it, man. Honestly.
We had a great
Any closing
conversation.
thoughts?
But shout out to my newest short that's coming out.
Oh yeah.
Little drummer boy. It's talking about issues on homelessness and gentrification. And I'm really excited that we got a fiscal sponsorship from Film Independent.
Nice.
So it makes all of our donations tax deductible. Such a blessing. So if anyone wants to learn more about it, follow me on Instagram. You don't gotta follow me, but you can keep the page.
No.
Links in the bio.
Links in the bio. The Film Independent link's gonna be in the bio, and people can donate to your film as well, like through Film Independent, right? So
right, you absolutely can get that tax write off too. But overall though, I'm just happy to be here, man. It was great chatting up with y'all. Hopefully, I'll be able to talk to y'all plenty of opportunities offline. But it's been great. Thank you for having me, honestly.
Yeah, man. And speaking of social media, where can everyone find you?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram right now, Jamal_Sutton. Jamal is my middle name. So I just thought it was really cool. I've had that name since like 2012. So Jamal_Sutton. That's where you can find me on Instagram. You can also add me on LinkedIn. I know that's what people do at USC.
Yeah, that's the most USC thing I've heard. Like,
on LinkedIn and Facebook as well, and more on my production company, allofaSuddenProductions.com is where you can see all of the stuff that I've made, my music videos, my short films, all that stuff.
Yeah, man, that's good shit, bro. Honestly, thank you for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Honestly, I really appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, there's some questions then I didn't get to ask. I was going to ask how did Stevie Wonder give you approval for Funky to use that song at the end?
You called up Stevie. You're like, yo, Stevie.
Yeah,
I gotta tell you, man.
I did get the rights cleared. That was a very difficult process. It was super hard. I got it cleared. I actually didn't pay him for it. But I was actually just proud that I went through the actual process of trying to get a song cleared, because the song is, if y'all haven't seen the film yet, you gotta see the film first.
Yeah,
I can't spoil the song.
Where can you find it?
You can find it on allofaSuddenProductions.com. Go under projects, and it's right there on Funky. You can hit the watch button. You can go check it out online for sure.
Yeah,
it's a lovely film.
That amazing music video you directed too, that I was also there for.
Yeah, you were. Oh, Trust You, man. Man, shout out to Yo-Yo Nosa. She's such a great artist, and she gave me an opportunity as well to make my first ever music video. And the only way I knew how to do it was through what my friends taught me in the film school. And that was actually the first thing I made getting into film school. And she was like, Ellis, like, you're so professional. Like, I was in Vegas, and they don't even do it like this. I'm like, I mean, I don't know how else. That's what I meant. Like, I didn't know how else to do it. I didn't know there was another way. So shout out to her for giving me an opportunity to make really great stuff. Honestly, I'm just fortunate. It's really cool.
That's cool, man. Honestly, super cool. Sabrina, where can everyone find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at SabrinaXMonica, and then also on Twitter at Sabrina on Film, along with my Patreon, Sabrina on Film.
Yeah, and you got a stream coming up, right?
Yep, this Friday's my first stream. I'm super excited. Yeah, I'm taking after you guys. I'm gonna figure out how to host and do all that kind of stuff, and not just be like a co-host.
Yeah.
Okay, do you think, Sabrina?
We'll see.
Hey,
I support it.
RB3, where can everyone find you?
Find me Twitter, Instagram at Director RB3. Yeah, that's where you can find me.
And I'm at Squad Leader Race, guys, and obviously follow us at First Cut TMO on Instagram and Twitter as well. That's where you can find videos like these. Support the homies, # support the homies. Let's get it going, guys. And if you haven't subscribed to First Cut, please do so. That's the best way to show the love, is to subscribe.
Yeah, and throw us a comment and a rating on iTunes, please. That really helps us out.
Yeah.
It really helps us out with the algorithm and grow. We have I think we have like close to 50 or something like that reviews on there right now. So if we could push that, let's keep pushing that to higher numbers, so we could keep getting the podcast out there and growing, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Alrighty, guys, for the Meaning of Podcast, I'm Andres.
This is RB3.
I'm Sabrina.
And we're peacing out, guys. Peace out.